Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, I want to dive into how do we help our kids who are learning from home, whether they're homeschooling or they're in an online program at home, because a lot of our kids are in those situations, and isolation is a true, huge issue for our kids with anxiety and OCD who are in that kind of home learning environment. So we'll talk about what to look for and what to do. That's what we'll be discussing today. But before we jump into it, I would like to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is a right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Also, if your child is at home, a great curriculum could be Crushing OCD for Kids and Teens course. And so why not make their mental health part of their curriculum and part of their day? These are bite-sized courses, and they're bite-sized lessons, which is actually what I meant to say, where they can watch a 5 to 10 minute video per day and get through the whole course and learn not only that they're not alone with OCD, but that there are also tools that they can use and start implementing no matter where they are in their journey. And the beautiful thing about this course is that I have 12 kids that help me teach it. And so not only am I trying to teach those skills, but I have 12 kids throughout the course talking about their own experiences, how they're applying these skills and how it's helping them. Sometimes it's best when they hear it from their peers. So you can check out that course. Just go to atparentingsurvival.com/P/OCD-class- for kids. I know that was a mouthful. You can also just go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com and you'll see my whole menu of all my courses, and you can find that one under the OCD category, or just replay what I just said. The link will be in the show notes as well. But definitely check that out if you have a child who is looking for supercharging those skills at home. And even if it's just used to normalize what they're going through, because that is the essence of what we're going to be talking about today, is how to reduce isolation. And a big component is the isolation in their journey with anxiety and OCD, and also like the literal concrete isolation of them being in their home. And so my hope when I created that course was by weaving in those 12 kids of all ages, really young kids all the way up to teenagers, to normalize that experience will really help with the isolation and the feeling of shame that comes with thinking that you are alone in this journey. All right, well, let's dive into today's topic. When we have our kids who are at home, sometimes I feel like they're at home because it's the optimal environment for them. I know with my own son, this is partly why I decided to do this topic today, because this is something that I see as a struggle firsthand. My son went into online school last semester, and now he started his freshman year of high school this year, continuing with the online program. And I know that it's been a struggle for a lot of you in the community about how to build connection and how to make sure that they're not isolated, because it perpetuates their anxiety and OCD. And I am now seeing that firsthand, where as part of the agreement for my son to go into an online program, there had to be this proactive plan of activities or connections that would keep him less isolated. And it's really easy for our kids to become isolated when they are doing education at home, because they're in their cocoon, they're in their bubble, and it's cozy. And to get out of their comfort zone can be a little bit extra hard, because they get complacent and they get used to being in a low demand environment. even though this doesn't feel low demand, and I'm sure it doesn't for you either, with having to get them up and having them to log on and having them to do their schoolwork. It's a lot of hand holding for most of our kids. Some of our kids are in those situations because their anxiety or OCD is so acute that they cannot go to a brick and mortar school. There are a lot of kids in the AT parenting community that are at home because they are homebound due to the severity of their anxiety and OCD. So there are those of you out there that are listening to this where maybe your kids aren't even doing a lot of education because they are really struggling with their mental health. And so they're at home. And there are others of you that have homeschooled your entire life. And that is just part of what you've always done. And there are some of you that, maybe similar to me, have realized that the optimal learning environment for your child is going to be a non-traditional route. And that was my awareness with my son, is he's going to blossom in a non-traditional educational environment. But along with that are all these other things that we have to put in place. And so I know when he was thinking about doing this, the thing I was thinking about is, how do I keep him connected? And the reason we want our kids connected and we want to continue to kind of push them out of their comfort zone on some level is because of that complacency. It's kind of like when you're working with your hands and you develop, calluses, and your hands are able to handle harder work because it protects you. Or maybe that's a bad analogy. Like when I'm trying to work out and I just started again after elbow surgery, it's like really painful, and it's like taking me it's like 10 times harder because my body's like, what is this? Like, why are you exercising? This isn't what we do anymore. And so it's extra painful. It's the same thing for our kids when they're isolated, connecting with other people, getting out of their comfort zone, doing things that they don't want to do per se, is even more painful if we don't keep those muscles engaged and keep them practicing those skills. So how do you do that? That's a hard question. And it really depends on where your child is at. So a lot of times we can throw a lot of things at them at once and overwhelm them. And then they don't want to do anything. And we kind of hit a roadblock. But sometimes it's better to say, like, get an assessment of where your child is at. And so some of you might have kids that have been at home for a very long time, and some of you might be new to this, and some of you might even be thinking about doing this. And so I know each one of you is maybe in a different place around this topic, but you want to ask yourself, what are some of the struggles? Because some of you may not have this issue at all, and you're just listening to this podcast because it mentioned homeschooling, and your child might be really engaged and not isolated and very connected with co-ops or homeschooling groups or lots of friends in the community. But most of you that are listening for advice are not in that situation. And it can be a slippery slope where it slowly happens over time, where you're like, I don't remember the last time my child was out of the house, because sometimes you're busy with your life. Maybe you have other kids, you're picking people up, or you're going to work and your child's at home educating. And it's hard to remember, oh my gosh, you know what? You actually literally haven't been out of the house in like 7 days. I think that's an easy thing to happen, honestly. Because especially when you're not aware, because they're doing everything at home. So the first step is, what would be out of your child's comfort zone? It may be, for some of you, just to get them out of their bedroom. You might have, and I know there are cases that parents have kids that are they're room bound. They're not even homebound, they're room bound. And so when we talk about proactively working on isolation, we're talking about getting them out of their bedroom. That is that one extreme. And some of you might be on the other end of the continuum where you want your kids to have social interaction. So where are you starting from? Look at that first and say, where am I starting from and where do I need to go? A lot of times I see when we're looking at a goal, my child is here and I want them to be here, we jump to the end. And yes, it's good to have the end in mind of like, where am I ultimately trying to get my child? What's my ultimate vision? That's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes I think it can overwhelm you. So it depends on you. If that big picture of where you're trying to get them is overwhelming, then don't have that big picture. If that big picture helps you understand and stay focused and consistent with your goal, then okay, have the end in mind. Ultimately for me, and I'll just use myself as an example throughout this episode, my goal is for my child to build his self-esteem, to feel more comfortable around peers, to start finding his beat around other people, whether it is peers, adults, or just in the public arena, going out to a restaurant or being outside. How does he navigate novel situations? And so that's one of my goals. And one of my other goal is like fostering independence. Can he do things on his own outside in the real world? And so those are my long-term goals. What are your long-term goals? What's the vision that you have for your child, regardless of where they're at? What's your vision or your hope, right? Because we don't have 100% control. It's just our hope of where we want things to go. And then go backwards. Okay, where are you at now? And that is okay. Wherever you are, what small steps can you do to the next small step? Often we want to bite the whole thing. We want to take one bite and get to the end goal. That's not possible. So what can you do to foster the next step? So if your child is permanently in their room, and a lot of times that happens with contamination OCD predominantly, or like severe depression. So, and those look different as far as why they can't leave their room. So if you have someone with contamination OCD, that might be their only safe bubble. So leaving their room is going to be really hard. It's going to be maybe an exposure. And so would the first step be, can they sit outside of their room and, have a conversation with you, or have some ice cream with you, or, not leaving their cocoon too far, but can they sit, and that may not be because of contamination. It just depends on your child, but can you hang out outside of the room? And if that means literally outside of the room, then that's where you start. But maybe that's too hard. Then maybe it's like, can you FaceTime? Can you play games through FaceTime? It's any connection. And I'm starting with the most severe, and we're going to move up to, people who are probably more well adapted and not in that severity category where you are looking for like outside connection. But for those of you that are really overwhelmed and desperate and in those critical conditions, I want you to know that there's also baby steps for you, right? Whatever small step it can be, whatever manageable step, you just ask yourself, what are they going to be willing to do? And what would help them feel connected? Because connection isn't necessarily about leaving the house. It is for the ones that we're going to talk about. Like my son is certainly, on the other end of the spectrum where we're talking about connections outside of the home. But there's a place to start for everybody. So I just wanted that message, that hopeful message, that no matter where you are in your journey, how can you foster connection? And the connection might be between your child or teen or young adult with the family. It might start with that. So when you think about your child, what are some of the things that they need or that they want? And maybe start with what they want and ask them. And this is hard because I think pride gets in the way and shame. And so a lot of times I think there's a defensive nature where kids will say things like, I like being alone, or I don't like people, or I'm happy where I'm at. Like, why are you pressuring me? And so you may not get buy-in from your kids. I know like for myself, I feel like my son doesn't like admit that he wants friends or connections. But a lot of times, even if our kids don't or can't articulate what they want or need, if you're not getting full pushback on getting them to do certain things outside of the home, now we're talking about the other end of the continuum now, it's worth pushing it a little bit. And it's like finding that sweet spot of, I'm going to push it to give you opportunities and to present you with opportunities and experiences. And when you put your feet down and you're digging your heels so deep that you're like up to your ankles in dirt, I'm going to back off, right? Because it loses its effectiveness when our kids are being forced long-term to go do something. And so just think about yourself, right? Have you ever forced yourself to do something over time and you hated it and you didn't feel like there was any like return benefit or anything that you enjoyed about it because you had to go, right? Like you have a work meeting, you have to go every week and you hate it and you don't show up in the best mood and you don't, take advantage of anything that they're doing in the meeting because you resent the fact that you have to be there. And I feel like that happens to our kids where they sabotage experiences if they feel trapped and they feel like they don't have any agency to decide what they want to do. But on the other hand, our kids sometimes need some coaxing. They need some encouraging of, I signed you up for this, and please just give it a couple of times to try it. Just getting that buy-in. And if you have a child who, will be, I don't want to do it, but they'll go do it, then that's the sweet spot, right? I mean, or you might have a child who's like, oh, thanks, Mom, but that's not likely. You might have a child like that. I don't have a child like that, but I'm sure they exist somewhere. And the hope, though, is finding that sweet spot between, oh, yay, thanks, Mom, and but I'll do it. Find that sweet spot. But if they're aggressive and, you can't make me do this and you're controlling, you have to start to gauge what is too much. And that is a hard judgment call a lot of the time. So just be aware of that. But we're going to talk about what are some actual concrete things that you can do for your kids after the break. But before that, I want you to think about what do they need, and so you have this big goal, and then we're talking about those little steps. And so, like for my son, he needs positive social interaction where he feels like he is connecting with people and people aren't bullying him or making fun of him, and so his self-esteem can grow. That is what he needs. But he also needs to know that he can do things on his own, that he can be independent. He can figure out how to go into a building or how to go do something without me being right there, which actually he has come a long way. He's actually really good at that. So think about what your kids need, what would help them. Some of it might be anxiety or OCD related as far as outside of the home, right? My son has social anxiety. He's got ADHD. These impact his social interactions. Maybe your child has contamination issues or moral OCD issues, or maybe they have social anxiety as well, or emetophobia, the fear of throwing up. And so those things are part of getting them out of the home, because that may be why they're at home to begin with, is that it just was too much of a struggle to get them to school because of their social anxiety, or because of their emetophobia, the fear of throwing up, or because of their germ fears, or whatever it was. And now that they're living in this cocoon environment and they don't have that, stressor, now is the time to actually do exposures where they're still getting outside of the home and exposing them to those situations in an environment that isn't going to dictate whether their educational success is on the line, right? Because sometimes we're like, you know what, we can't sabotage their educational treatment, or not treatment, but educational success. And they're going to fail out because of their social anxiety or emetophobia or OCD or whatever. And so we're going to keep them at home. And so that's that category of people that I mentioned in the beginning of the episode who are doing it because of the mental health issues. I didn't do it because of my child's mental health issues, because I really only recommend doing that when they're in an acute state and there's no other choice. Like sending them to school is doing more damage. It's more harm than good, and at that point you're like, okay, we have to take a mental health break and regroup, work on therapy, work on exposures, and then get them back to where they'll succeed. With my son, the educational environment just wasn't working for his ADHD, and it wasn't working he was gifted and he was objectively getting bullied. And he was a quirky kid. And so I couldn't guarantee that any other environment in person was not going to bring up the same results. And so the online world was a really good option because he's gifted and he's really educated. He could easily do the work once we got him treated for his ADHD, but he does have social anxiety. And so even though that was not a key component to going online, the bullying did make his social anxiety a lot worse. The goal was to just give him this optimal learning environment. But now we still have social anxiety and he's not getting an opportunity to practice being in school every day around other people and learning how to navigate that. And so we don't just give up, right? We say, okay, how can we give him those experiences in bite-sized pieces so that he can build his skills in an optimal way, in a positive way, where the outcome mostly is positive, and he can build up his self-esteem, his self-identity, and his social skills. So after the break, I'm going to talk about some concrete things that we did and some suggestions for you, or some problem solving of opportunities that you can look into. And we can see where you can go from there. All right, stay tuned. We'll be back after this.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realised that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
All right, well, welcome back. So when I decided that we're going to do online, and I say we because it does feel like a we, doesn't it? I mean, you're signing up for a lot when you do online or homeschooling. It's having to get them up, and now there's no bus to catch, or there's no 8 a.m. school bell to go off. And so there's a lot that goes on. And then it's keeping them on task and checking their grades and making sure they're doing their work. It's, I have just so much more respect for parents who have been doing that for a long time, because this is a new journey for me. And I'm wow, I'm so fortunate that my whole job is online now. I closed my private practice, and everything I do is just supporting the AT parenting community and my courses and this podcast and my YouTube. And there's things I can do. It's my schedule for the most part. We do have live classes on Fridays, but for the most part, it's my schedule. And thank goodness for that, because it's a full-time job. It's gotten better though. I mean, he's working independently, but I have to get him started. I have to figure out where he's at. And I'm sure you can 100% relate. So hopefully before the break, you thought about what your main goals are and what are the skills that you're really trying to facilitate. There are a lot of online ways to make our kids feel less isolated. And so it's not only just about leaving the house. That is a component, and we're going to talk about that. But I want to start with online, because we have to start with where our kids are able or willing to start. And for some of you, it might be online. And so with online, are there support groups? or are there fun activities that you can find online where your kids can see people in real time? And so I know for my son, and I don't get to pick in which ways he's going to connect, but he has found connecting with people online through video games very bonding, and it's a socialization. And so I have learned to respect that and to see that as a way that he's connecting with people, real people, people that he talks to every day. And so a lot of our kids will choose that. They will pick that. And I think for us who are like digital nomads and, old people who didn't grow up with the digital age, we may see that as not a real connection, but it is to them. We have to value that on some level, that they are connecting to real people through their digital devices. Obviously, we have to monitor that because that can be scary. But a lot of our kids, especially who are homeschooled or online, may be connecting with people online, and maybe ask them, do you have friends online? Because you may not know. Who do you talk to online? Definitely be aware of that, because it is something that you want to monitor and be aware of. But also, they might have this whole world that you don't know about. I know my older daughter, who's in college now, who had a lot of social anxiety, her whole, I don't know, she had friends at school, but a lot of her world was on Minecraft, and she was a Minecraft moderator, and she had friends, and it was like kind of her identity was wrapped into that. And that is okay. She actually is currently in California, and she's getting her degree in art, and she's going to be in game design. That actually served some purpose for her. She's incredibly talented, and we never know where things are going to go. But my whole point is, where are they already connecting? You may not know where they're connecting. They might be talking to people or friends online. But the next thing is, can you introduce them to little bursts of social interaction that is contained? And one of the things that I like is outschool.com. Have you ever heard of it? And they're not sponsoring this episode. I just love Outschool. Actually, I think we started using Outschool, might have been COVID time, or maybe it was before then. But I started to use Outschool. Well, let me just tell you what Outschool is. Outschool is a platform where you can sign up for activities. They have courses, they have tutoring, they have private lessons, they have clubs, they have summer camps, and they have all sorts of topics. And what it really is it's so simple. You just sign up for whatever it is you're looking to sign up for. And then normally it's on Zoom. They just jump on Zoom and they're with a bunch of other people. And I started doing that with my kids for their social anxiety exposures. I would sign them up for a club or something. And what I like about it is there's really no commitment. You can sign them up for one class or two classes. It's not like they're stuck there. And you can sort out the classes by age. And so, I'm just looking at this stuff. Wait, do I have? Oh, no, I thought I had credit on here. I'm looking at their website and it said, use your credit. And I was like, I have credit? I don't have credit. That was just but just to give you a snapshot of some of the things that are on here. I mean, there are tons, but I just searched for age 14 to 18 and it's like social skill strategies for teens, 13 to 18, $16 per class, 50 minutes. Social skills for autism for teens, $13 per class. And I touched on, I was just looking at regular like teen groups, but a lot of them are just like things that your kids like. Animal Crossing weekly team social gaming club, $15 per class, 12 to 17-year-olds. Mindful meditation, but you might want to start with something that your kids are into. They've got an Among Us weekly teen social gaming club, Roblox club. And that's what I do with my kids. My daughter was into acting and she did like an impromptu class. I can't remember what my son did at the time, but they would get bravery points for showing up and, participating in the class. And it was a really great way for them to connect with other peers without the stress of, I'm going to see this peer all the time, right? Like there's not a lot of risk in, I'm going to see a bunch of strangers. Yes, that's really scary and uncomfortable, but I may not have to see them ever again. I can show up one time. Maybe I like it. Maybe I want to show up again and again and again. So that's a really great option for just isolation and social interaction. And so they do have a lot of social emotional options as far as building social skills, self-regulation, and that kind of stuff. But they also have things that are just what kids like. When my son started his 3D printing, I mean, my brain is like 2 steps ahead of what I'm going to say. When he started his online work, I signed him up for coaching for 3D printing because he was really into 3D printing. And there were 3D printing groups, but he hadn't really set up his 3D printer to the point where it was working well. And so I said to him, how about I get you some one-on-one coaching for like the next 4 weeks for 3D printing. And then when you feel comfortable, we can go to his groups because he does groups. Unfortunately, after the 4 to 6 sessions that he did on 3D printing, he got frustrated with his 3D printer and he didn't want to do the 3D printing group, which was unfortunate. But I let it go, right? Because it's this like tug of war thing. Like, I'm not going to have a tug of war with everything. I'm going to give you opportunities, and then you may want to continue, may not want it, but all I'm asking is that you try. So that was something. So there's a lot of online opportunities. For those of you that are members of the AT parenting community, we do monthly support group calls. And so we have a kid call from 7 to 11-year-olds, and we have a teen call, 12 to 18-year-olds. And, you know, join the calls. They're once a month. They're normally the first Saturday of every month. And if you're not a member, you can join the AT parenting community at atparentingcommunity.com. That is only one small part of what we do in the AT parenting community. We actually have weekly live Zoom classes for the parents. You get free access to a huge amount of my courses. We have all sorts of things. We have a buddy program where we connect you to other parents and your child to other kids. And there's a lot. But the connection part is really the support group calls. And the buddy program where we actually connect one child to another child. We have a spreadsheet, and people who agree to be part of the buddy program can look at the spreadsheet and they can see like, oh, this child is in my same city, or they are my child's age, or they have the same exact interests as my child, or they have the same struggles as my child. And so I'm going to reach out to that parent and connect our kids in real life. And so the goal is to facilitate in real life connections. And the most beautiful thing is when I do the support group call and people say, hey, and they're saying hi to someone else. And they're like, that's my buddy. I met her in the buddy program and like, we're best friends now. I love that. That actually happened in the parent group this past week, where one parent was saying, we share our wins at the beginning of the call. And one of the wins was that they met another parent that lived in their area and had similar struggles, and that they were so thankful that they had someone to text with. And I was like, oh, I love that. So those connections are important for us, but they're also important for our kids. So look at online programming, whether it's a fun thing or a support group. It's an easier sell when it's something that they're into versus like a therapeutics thing, but take it one step at a time. And the next thing is, what can I do to get them out of the house? What can I do to get them involved in other activities? Now, some homeschooling and online programs offer an in-person component. And so I know there's homeschooling co-ops. Could your child join one of those? And sometimes it's overwhelming for them to have this idea that they're going to have to go somewhere every week. And so you can frame it like, just give it 3 tries. And if you don't like it by the 3rd try, then we'll let it go. Because often, if they're going to be able to stomach it after 3 times, they're going to be able to do it. If they hate it more and more each time, and by the 3rd time, they're like grinding their teeth and, cursing at you, it's not going to work out, So I always feel like 3 is a magic number. And so I always say to my kids, just try it 3 times. And if you don't like it by the 3rd time, we'll let it go. And I've said that when I had my private practice to parents, just tell them they only have to do 3 sessions. And if they're not happy at the 3rd session, then they don't have to come back, because we really want to foster our kids' agency, that you have agency over your own decisions on some level, because there's more buy-in when they feel like they're not being forced, which I know can be a bit of a tricky balance. So I'd recommend looking at homeschool co-ops, or if it's an online program, a lot of times they might have a component where they can do online work in a physical location at some point. And I know with my son, I've been really thankful that there's a hybrid component to his online program. And there's actually this incredible opportunity where on Fridays, he actually can go down to the university because he's it's a university online program for high schooler students. So it's super cool. But he is able to go into this health program where he is learning from college professors, and they have people in the community coming, and he's surrounded by like 30 peers. And so he's getting that in-person contact and also that independence because it's a college campus and they're able to go and they're downtown and they're able to go and walk to get lunch and come back and be treated kind of, like a high school student, which he is. But I think that's great to foster that independence. So that's checking off a goal on my list, right? Fostering independence, being around peers in a controlled environment. It's a short period of time. It's just one day a week, but there's an opportunity for that to grow. So if he's liking that, we can grow that. He could go in person 2 days a week. It's a different program. It's just probably sitting there with his laptop working on his stuff, but he's around peers. That is an option. So look at those options in the programs that you're doing, whether it's homeschool or online. And are there? Maybe you don't know, but maybe there are some things. A lot of times there's clubs that are involved. Sometimes they're all virtual, but sometimes they're in person. And so, if you're in an online program, ask, are there clubs for the kids? What kind of online or in-person activities do they have that are extracurricular? I am surprised at how many extracurricular things there are going on in his program. And a lot of times in homeschooling co-ops and stuff, there are events and things that you can do. So, really branching out and tapping into those things can be helpful. Now with my son, he doesn't want to do any of that. I was like, oh, there's these clubs. Honestly, I wouldn't want to use the word overwhelmed, but he's got a full plate when it already comes to him doing schoolwork. And so for him to be online doing a club, he did do it last semester. He did baking club. And it really added to his stress because it was like one more thing he had to do during the day and he wasn't able to do his schoolwork and he didn't really seem to enjoy it. And so we let that go, right? Trial and error, like what will work, what won't work. I also found a teen confidence coach who did teen confidence groups. That's been phenomenal. I'm actually going to have her on the podcast eventually, and I'm actually going to probably do an event with her online. So you'll hear more about her in the weeks to come or months to come, but I'll give you her website. So her website is walkforwardcoaching.com. That's walkforwardcoaching.com. I'll leave a link in the show notes. And you can see all the really cool things that the kids do and give you an idea of what things might be available in your area. Just look up teen programs or teen extracurricular activities. You might find something like this. Another shout out for Sharon West, who is the teen coach in this group, is that she does do virtual. And she does do virtual coaching on boosting teen confidence. And so that's another outlet. Sometimes we think it's all peer related, or sometimes we think it's all out of the home related. But having other connections with people, whether it's a coach or a life coach or other peers, like in OutSchool where they're doing something fun, is really huge. It's part of the bigger picture. And so I know she can do coaching online, and I know she does sometimes 2 kids at a time. So she pairs them. And so you might want to reach out to her and see if she has anyone on her waiting list. So there are 2 kids and she'll find like a good match, and then she'll coach both of them together in a virtual coaching call. And that is a really nice controlled social interaction where you are one-on-one with another peer, and having a coach facilitate that. That's huge. So check out her website, walkforwardcoaching.com. So I have him signed up for that. He's actually in 2 of her programs. And so she has an 8-week Teen Quest program that actually goes through like these pillars of skills that build their self-confidence. And then she also has these like teen camp activities, which are kind of like adventure experiences, which is really, really pushing my son to his edge because so many of his fears are around insects and bees and doing scary things that might, put him in danger. Like she's done zip lining, and they went to a lake and they're There are like these huge slides that go into the lake. These are all really scary things for him. So those adventures are really pushing him out of his comfort zone, and his peers are encouraging him. And so it's a beautiful thing. And there might be something like that in your area, or you might be like, hey, I want to tap into that coaching that she's doing. That sounds amazing. So reach out to her and check that out. But there might be some things in your area that you can tap into. But there are other things as well. It might be, can I go out to lunch with my child once a week or twice a week? So giving them a break from being in the house and taking them out where they have to order their food, they have to eat in front of other people. Those kind of things can be really important. This might be extreme, and so you might not have this situation, but you might need to mark down when they've been out of the house, because if they're not leaving the house every day, you may not be aware, like, oh gosh, they haven't been out of the house in 4 days. That can easily happen for some of us, I think, when we are in this situation. For my son, I pay attention to like what he's interested in. The moment he's like, oh, I'm curious about this, or I want to do this, I make it happen, because I want to take advantage of that opportunity of him wanting something. And so with the teen confidence group, he didn't want to go when I first signed him up, but he didn't push back. And so it was one of those things like, just try it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to do it. Well, he's loved it. He did it all throughout the summer. I think he did it at the end of last school year, and he didn't have any issue at all when I signed him back up. In fact, he asked, when are those going to start? So I know he likes those. So that's a total winner. I did sign him up for an ADHD therapy group because I thought, well, I want him to be around other people. He was just recently diagnosed, and that fell flat. And I said, just try it and let me know. And he's like, why are you doing this? I already have all this stuff. I'm happy. I know I'm not alone. I don't need it. And I said, just try it one time, because you never know what thing is going to really open up something for their life and what thing is going to fall flat. And he tried it, and it was on Zoom, and he came out and he's like, nope, I didn't want that. I didn't like it. I'm like, okay, you don't have to go back. That's the end of that, because he's got all these other things going on. He did mention, oh, I really want to work out, and I really wish I had like a trainer, because I really want to get in shape. Well, my jaw dropped, because he's never mentioned any motivation to do any of that. And so instead of sitting with that, I put that into action right away. Would you want a private trainer or a personal trainer? And he's like, I don't know, that makes me uncomfortable, but and I was like, well, let me see if I can find a situation that would work out. And so I dug and I searched, and I had heard of somebody in the past, and I found him again, and he's like in his house in my neighborhood, literally like 2 streets away from where we live. And he does one-on-one training in his house. Well, that's perfect. And he gave me a discount, and we both go together, because honestly, it was too much for him to go by himself. He felt really uncomfortable just being alone because of his social anxiety, and I could be in shape. I guess that goes full circle from what I said in the very beginning, where I said I'm exercising now after my surgery, which happened because I was lifting 3-pound weights and doing YouTube cardio and messed up my elbow to the point where I need elbow surgery. So I was a little reluctant to start exercising again, but I wanted to do it with him so that we had this commitment and that he would do it, because I don't think he was going to do it if I didn't go with him. But, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, because now I'm getting in shape, he's getting in shape, and it's 3 times a week, and he's getting out of the house, and he's having a social interaction with another person other than me. And so then I look at his day, and I'm like, or I look at his week, and I think, okay, 3 times a week, he's having to leave the house to go interact with someone else who's really pushing him and doing, physical things. He's got the teen confidence thing that's happening every other week. And then once a Friday, like 1 month every Friday, they have like their camp thing. And that's a lot. That's a lot for somebody who doesn't really like a lot of socializing or getting out of their comfort zone. And to me, that plate is full. I know he's getting social interaction. He's got the Fridays where he goes in person, and that's a lot. And so I'm using this as an example to show you like all the different ways we can get our kids connected. And that may be way too much for your child, or you may think, I'll never get my child to do that much, or you might be doing more. We're all in different places. But think about that. And my hope is that this is just more of a springboard for you to say, those are interesting things. Let me think about what that would look like for us in our situation. Or what's my first step? And it might be doing something outside of their bedroom, right? First step. But the goal is to really make sure that they're not feeling isolated. So any connection is a good connection as long as it's positive. Sometimes we don't get to control whether it's positive or not, but those connections are important. So the connection and letting them know they're not alone and making sure they, depending on where they are as far as their anxiety or OCD, but really trying to make sure that we get them out of the house, doing things, interacting, ordering food, doing things on their own so that they are, their independence is being fostered as well. That's really important. So I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that you find my podcast helpful in general. And if you are, don't forget to hit a star on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher, wherever you consume your podcasts. That does really support the show, and I appreciate it. And if you write a review, I might be reading your review next time because I read them to show my gratitude. And I want to thank Beth for writing a review, who wrote relatable advice. I found this podcast when looking for a helpful podcast to listen because my daughter has anxiety. This has by far been the most helpful and most relatable. She often uses real life examples and has her own stories to share, which makes it not feel so isolating. Thank you, Beth, for taking the time to write that. I really appreciate it. You know, that is my ultimate goal is, somebody asked me just recently, I'm trying to think who asked me this. I think I might have been getting interviewed. I can't remember, but they said, I'm sure it was an interview. And they said, what makes your podcast different than other podcasts? And I thought that's an interesting question. And I said, I think it's that, yes, I'm a therapist, but I don't see that as my number one role in this podcast. Like the goal of my podcast, I think she said, what's your goal of the podcast? And I said, it's to let parents know they're not alone. And yeah, it's great that I have that clinical expertise so I can sprinkle it in, bring guests in, and talk to you from an evidence-based approach. But ultimately, it's to say, I'm in the trenches too, and we're in it together. And let me share my life and how I'm weaving the things I'm talking about. Sometimes they go bad, sometimes they go good, and I share the good, the bad, and the ugly because I want it to be as real as possible so that you know that you're not alone and that this stuff is hard. And sometimes we knock it out of the park, and sometimes it knocks us out. But we just get up and we try again. So maybe if you write a review, I'll be reading yours next time. Thank you so much, Beth, for writing that. And I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do. And I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.